Welcome, everybody. So great to see you today. And welcome to today's GoGN and Knowledge Equity Network session, Equity, Solidarity and Resistance, Voices from the Open Education Space. My name is Beck Pitt. I'm going to be chairing this session. I'm super excited to be here today. We've got three awesome panelists. We're going to have a great discussion together. And welcome you, and thanks so much for joining today as well. So as I said, my name is Beck Pitt. I'm co-director of the Global OER Graduate Network, and I'm going to be chairing this session. We're just getting started. I know a few people are still coming on board into this session, so still feel free to say hello in the chat and let us know where you're coming in from. We've got folks from all around the world that have been joining these sessions, so I'm grateful for your time and participation. I'm going to hand over to Tom now, who's going to tell us a little bit about the Knowledge Equity Network. So over to you. Thanks, Tom.
Hi, thanks so much, Beck, and welcome everyone. It's great to see you joining us today. So the Knowledge Equity Network, in brief, is a collaborative network which looks to engender collaboration across areas such as open education, open research, open access, and really to look at the wider impact that knowledge equity could have on the higher education sector and how higher education could impact in turn on knowledge equity. So we have a declaration on our website which sets out certain principles which include universal, collaborative, inclusive and sustainable working. We invite people to read that declaration, and if it's something that you agree with, then to sign it. It's completely free to join the network, and we have at the moment actually just over 420 individuals signed up, 28 higher education institutions and 51 organizations across the world. As a network, we were co-founded by the universities of Pretoria and Leeds. So there's a sort of global south, global north representative foundation there within the network. We welcome contact from people in relation to projects they're running, and also we welcome collaboration, whether that's on an individual researcher basis or whether it's institution or organizations. We'd really welcome you getting in touch with us. We've actually collaborated on this series with Beck and with GoGN, which we're really pleased about. This is the fifth in the series, and we've just announced the next session beyond this, which is on Thursday, the 6th of November, which Beck will highlight in just a moment. Thanks so much, Beck.
Thanks so much, Tom. That's fantastic. Really appreciate that. And oh, and these slides are moving forward at their own pace. Oops, let's just stop that one there. So just to go back a moment. So just to tell you a little bit more about GoGN. As you may be aware, GoGN stands for the Global OER Graduate Network. I'm not sure why my slides are doing that, but bear with us a second. So I'll pop the link in the chat in the moment. But we support doctoral researchers around the world working on open education topics. Anyone is welcome to join GoGN. So we have a wider community of practice of around almost 300 practitioners, in addition to our 200 doctoral researcher and alumni members. We collaborate, we do lots of kind of activities together. We run workshops, sessions like these with colleagues and friends such as the Knowledge Equity Network. And we also produce things like collaborative publications. If this slide will hold, you can see some of these resources here. These will produce collaboratively with our membership, include things like the Research Methods Handbook, the Doctoral Supervision Guide, our Conceptual Frameworks Guide, and other resources. They're all available on an open license, so please do go and check those out if you haven't seen these before. And of course, go and find out more about the network, and please do join us if it's at all of interest. As Tom mentioned, we've been collaborating with the Knowledge Equity Network on this series, on this webinar series, and we're now on the penultimate session of 6 sessions that we've been doing together. And I'll hand over to Tom in a minute to tell us a little bit about the final session that's coming up 2 weeks tomorrow. But you can find our earlier sessions available here on YouTube. Please do head to the QR code on the top right-hand side of this slide. So yeah, some really fantastic sessions with great speakers that we've had, and thanks so much to everybody who's joined those. I know some people have been joining all the sessions through, so really appreciate your support. Tom, did you want to say a few words about the session that's coming up here, if that's all right?
Yeah, really happy to. Excuse me. So yeah, our final session, which is actually in 2 weeks' time, on Thursday, the 6th of November, is elevating equity through open education practices. We've got two guests joining us, Diana Hernandez Montoya from Costa Rica and Tel Emil joining us from Brazil. So they'll be giving us a Latin American perspective on open education, but also looking at aspects of open education such as the platformization of education, and digital inclusion and the fabrication of equity. So yeah, a couple of aspects there that we haven't touched on so far through this series, which I think will be really, really useful and give us a different perspective. So yeah, please do join us. This QR code will take you through to that, but I'll put the link in the chat as well later.
Super. Thanks so much, Tom, for that. That's fantastic. So yeah, please do join us. But here today, and we would like to really welcome everybody to this session. And we're going to introduce and hear from our panelists in a moment. Just to say, we are using the chat and Q&A. I apologize, I can't currently see the chat and Q&A, but I will stop sharing shortly and be able to engage a bit more fully with that. But please do put your comments and questions as we move through the session into the chat or Q&A, and we'll pick up on those as we go through today's session. Really, really excited for this opportunity. We have Sarita, Maha, and Sarah with us to talk about equity, solidarity, and resistance. As we kind of mentioned, this has been part of a series, and as we've kind of moved through the past kind of four sessions, we've been touching on a lot of different themes that are pertinent to this: collaboration, the need for criticality and a critical approach, decolonization, the role of community and co-creation. These have all been kind of picked up on as ways that we can kind of approach equity in open education spaces. And I know that care was also mentioned, I think, in some of the discussions that have been coming out. And I think that's going to possibly be coming out through the discussion as well as we move through today. So it's really fantastic that we've got our panelists with us. And I'd like now to let everybody kind of have the opportunity to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their own context as well, and as part of that. So Maha, are you happy to start? Thanks so much.
Sure. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. That just means peace be upon you. It works for any time zone, so that's really great. So whether it's morning or night for you. So I'm Maha Bali. I am a professor of practice at the American University in Cairo, and my main role there is at the Center for Learning and Teaching. So I'm an educational developer. My main role is to support other educators with their teaching, whether that's digital or non-digital. And of course, during COVID and with AI, they come to us more than usual. And I also teach my own class on digital literacies, AI literacy, and intercultural learning. And I try to bring my students into a lot of open spaces in that process as well. And I have a lot of open scholarship, which we'll talk about later. But I guess the most important aspect of it is Equity Unbound, which we don't know what to call it exactly. It's a thing. Open, connected, intercultural, equity-focused community, and we offer a lot of open, free professional development and support educators who care about equity all over the world, mainly. And I'll stop here for now to give everyone else a chance.
Thanks so much, Maha. And yeah, congratulations as well on the recent OE Global Award as well. Your work with Equity Unbound, really fantastic. So yeah, thank you so much. That's wonderful. And can I invite Sarita, if that's all right, to come and introduce. Thanks so much, Sarita.
Sure. Thank you. And it's so great to be here and welcome everyone. I'm in an early time zone, so apologize if I yawn at any point. Um, so just want to thank the organizers for inviting me. Really excited again to be here. So my name is Surita Jhangiani, and I'm an associate professor of teaching at the University of British Columbia in the Faculty of Education. And one of the things there that I hold is the David Lamb Chair in Multicultural Education. And so my work there focuses on redressing epistemic and social injustice. So that's what a lot of my work is currently focusing on, looking at ways to push different narratives forward, many of those that are often at the margins. And so I'm working with different groups, different community groups to see how we can work on resources or different materials to really center voices that are at the margins. So just kind of leave it there for now, and more will come out through the Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sarita. That's fantastic. Thank you. And Sarah, please.
Hi, thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be here on this panel. Really looking forward to it. So I'm Sarah Hutton. I am an education and clinical services librarian at the University of Massachusetts Medical School. It's on the Eastern Coast, about 2 hours west of Boston. I also am a research faculty in the School of Public Policy at UMass Amherst, and I advise on research and development in different open source hardware projects and open data projects as a part of the Internet of Production. My work currently sits pretty much at the intersection of everything that is under attack by our federal government. So scientific, medical research, DEI. So my main role at the medical school currently is running, systematic and scoping review research teams with physicians, working with folks in public health. I've also been, co-leading and coordinating an environmental justice collaborative that's starting within the medical school and then spreading across the system, looking at ways in which we can still continue to do the work that we've been doing, even though our federal funding is getting pulled and folks are disappearing. I think I'll leave it at that because there's a lot more I'm sure that's going to come out in conversation. So I'll stop there.
That's great. Thank you so much, Sarah. And yeah, we'll come back and pick up on lots of the threads that have been surfaced from you and other introductions from Maha and Sarita as well. So thank you so much for those. I just wanted to open really with we've heard a little about the context that you're all kind of working in, and I wonder if in terms of equitable open education, what that looks like within the spaces and the places that you're currently working in. Sorry. So I don't know who would like to go first. I don't know, Maha, whether you wanted to kind of start and kick us off. That's all right.
Yeah, so this is actually quite a complex question. So I co-authored a paper with Sarita's husband, who I think was a guest here recently, Rajiv, and Catherine Cronin, building on the work of others from South Africa around what does it mean when we talk about social justice and open educational practices, right? And we were building on the work of Nancy Fraser and thinking about equitable is not just economic, but also cultural and political. And of course, there are other angles related to things like accessibility and things like that. But those three angles are really important. And I think obviously one of the most important aspects of open education is being free, but then if people don't even have access to like internet connectivity or stable electricity, that becomes an issue. And we keep thinking, oh, it's available, you take it, and then we'll give you an offline version. Well, the offline version doesn't have all the practices, right? It has the content but not the practices. Another aspect, of course, that touches a lot just coming from the global south is the cultural aspect, is the open education, does it incorporate all the diverse cultural perspectives, and are they equitably represented and not stereotyped and appropriated and things like that? And of course, the third one, the political, like who's creating everything, right? So those three aspects are very important to us. And so, for example, first of all, within an institution, I work at the American University in Cairo. So this is not open, obviously, this is an institution, but just the institution itself is colonialist, right? It's an American institution in Egypt. And trying to make sure that it's bicultural and not just pushing the Western agenda is something that we have to do intentionally. And the presence of a lot of open resources that allow this to happen is very important and helpful. In a lot of other educational contexts, a lot of material that is available is not available legally in a way that is affordable. But then when it is, it's still not addressing different cultures. So you're still learning like the Western knowledge in those ways. And so what we try to do, for example, with whatever we do with Equity Unbound is to make sure more than anything else what we call pre-design of intentionally equitable hospitality. Is like before you go and do anything, you ask your question, who am I going to involve in the process of designing this? And that I think meets a lot of principles, like the principles of design justice from Sasha Costanza-Chock and others. And that aspect is really important. So with Equity Unbound, like originally it was myself and Mia Zamora and Catherine Cronin starting it, with Catherine in Ireland, Mia in the US. But the team of people who work with us now are from all over the world, and incorporates people who are in full-time positions in institutions and people who are more, freelance and less, and people who are graduate students and people who have disabilities and people who are undergraduate students, and so having that diversity of people working together on something means it's more likely that you will meet the needs of different groups by at least incorporating. And of course, nobody represents everyone of their identity group, and it's very intersectional, but at least trying to make sure that the voices that may not normally be heard do get heard in those spaces. So that's what it means to me.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much, Maha. And I know Sarah as well. Your voice is your work is focused on kind of amplifying marginalized voices as well in open education and co-creation. And you kind of, I wondered if you could tell us a bit more about the work that you're doing and yeah, what equitable open education looks like, particularly given the challenges, and we'll pick up again on these a bit later as well. But it would be brilliant if you'd share a little bit more about that, if that's all right. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Just to echo a bit of what Maha was already speaking about is that, I think that one of the biggest misunderstandings and assumptions that's made with, scientific research and, just kind of grounding it in the medical and health sciences space is that, oh, it's empirical evidence, it's quantitative, it's like, the great unifier across. And it really isn't, because it's a lot of this research upon which many of these studies are based, and then iterative design and further on are grounded in the global north and the west. They're funded by companies in the global north and the west. And when, grounding again in health sciences, public health, and medical, a lot of the populations in these clinical trials, global north, west, Caucasian men. And so a lot of the work that I do, personally, professionally, and just, I guess, in general, is really trying to get as deep into the source of that inequity as possible. And so as somebody who, does work in anything from advising on participatory action research when it comes to creating new data standards to, we're going to talk about how algorithms are developed in search engines, to, in the current context at the medical school where, when I work with these teams of physicians who are, not exclusively, but predominantly from the US and the New England region, when it comes to even conducting like a systematic review in that preliminary literature search, even down to when they go to limit to English only studies, I'm like, now hold on a minute. Let me tell you why. That's, you're going to be eliminating all of these different studies and really to have that deeper conversation about like, okay, what is the clinical outcome that you're looking for? And globally speaking, where are these researchers residing? Where is this a burgeoning trend? How could you think a little bit differently about recontextualizing your approach? And this again, how scientific research has been, deeply steep in the Western world, it shows up in publishing as well. And it is a conversation that is being had but needs to be amplified so far as predatory publishing lists are concerned, because there is this phenomenon within scholarly and academic publishing where if researchers are, if you have to pay to play to publish something, you sometimes automatically, the publisher gets put on this list that gets kind of shared around different academic institutions. And I guess to put it simply, there are a lot of burgeoning publishers who are using the money to pay for infrastructure because they don't have funding subsidized by their institutions or by their municipalities. And so they end up on these lists, and that cuts out yet another voice in, whichever region. This has become a huge problem with publishers that are grounded in India. For example, there are a lot on the lists that get passed around scholarly publishing circles in academia. So more on the ground, and I'll keep this in brief because I know this will come up again. So far as the co-creation aspect of things is concerned, in the medical school, I've been teaching environmental justice workshops and partnering with different clinical pathways programs, which, work with medical residents who are looking to connect with some of these global nodes that are connecting with clinics that are in, there are very strong connections in many African countries, and also, growing into South America as well. And there are faculty advisors that, maintain these connections. But when it comes time for these students to start thinking about, what type of research we want to do on these longitudinal projects, I work with them to talk about, how to broaden their thinking around how to approach things. It's not just you're studying this phenomenon. You are being welcomed into this community. You need to consider, being a part of that phenomenon, not just being extractive, not just doing your field research and then you're going to bounce. And also recontextualized many of the issues. And back to your point back of, given the current context in the US, trying to really ground it in like, this is what's happening in your own community and you don't even see it. You don't even see within, like, we're located, the medical school is adjacent to the Worcester area, which is an environmental justice neighborhood defined by socioeconomic status and education levels and et cetera. And a lot of the folks I've talked to who are locals don't even know. They don't even know. They really don't, participate in local governance as much, but are looking at, oh, we need to go out and help these other communities. And I'm like, let's, kind of take a moment to take a beat and understand, the situation and context you're currently living in before you consider going out and like rescuing another community. Because that's where I feel like a lot of these problematic conversations really start.
Thanks so much, Sarah. That's great. And surfacing that and yeah, getting people, I guess, to appreciate more critically the situations that they're in rather than is super important, that positionality and working together. Thank you so much for surfacing and talking about that with us. Surita, I want to bring you in now as well, just to maybe if that's all right, to talk a bit more about your work as well. You mentioned that you're the David Lamb Chair in Multicultural Education, and your work kind of focuses on exploring open education and epistemic social justice. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit more about that and how you can kind of ensure that we're really the voices that are often excluded from these kind of discussions are heard. Thanks.
Sure. So maybe I'll just get a little how I kind of got started in this area. So a couple of years ago at our institution, there's a lot of work around decolonizing the syllabus, and I started there working with groups. There was this course that I was working on in the teacher education program. So really worked with other colleagues. We worked collaboratively to see how we could change this. So we thought we'd done a great job and teaching the course. And then one day I'm in the classroom and somebody says, I just don't feel like I belong. It kind of hit me like, after all this work, right? And so that comment was many years ago, but it's always stayed with me. And then I was reflecting on the course and I was like, even though we have diverse authors and different perspectives, or so I thought, the students still didn't see themselves reflected. They didn't see themselves in the work that they were reading. And so that really made me start to think, okay, we're thinking about the voices, the experiences, they're still not there. And that's what led me down to open educational practices and pedagogy is how can we work more collaboratively to have those diverse experiences. And if you look at teacher education, I want to say in the North American context, maybe even the global North, looking at the literature, there's quite a lot about the lack of diversity, the lack of voices that are in there in teacher education. If you look at those who go in the teaching profession after 5 years, there's a high dropout rate amongst those who are historically, persistently, or systemically marginalized from those groups. And so I think this to me really highlighted the need that there is a need to shift it. Many are working on it, but really highlighted, okay, what else can we do? And so when I got this David Lamb chair, that's what I wanted to center the work on. And so I have a few projects where we're trying to work collaboratively with community. So one area that I'll just highlight is social emotional learning. Um, Oftentimes that comes from one particular perspective, but it doesn't look at a more diverse global. What does it mean? What does social emotional learning mean? How does that come up in different ways in different cultures? How that expressed? So I've got one group that's working right now, kind of within the Canadian context, working with a school and community to develop a story that is co-created with students in an elementary setting. And then what we hope to do is then share it in another context and see how can we have that iterative process and again add more diversity and voices and perspectives to it. So just in this context, it's really how can we work together collaboratively to get those different narratives out there that are often left out.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Sarita. And I wonder, Maha, Sarah, if you had any reflections as well to bring in as well, this kind of working together, bringing in different perspectives and iterating in the way that Sarita described, that's really key to kind of ensuring that, the things that we're doing better reflect and involve folks.
I think I would just, mention in brief a project that that we've been working at the state level in Massachusetts. So as a part of the Massachusetts Department of Higher Education and their OER advisory board on which I and many folks across the state sit, there's the Rotel program, which I'm not sure. I'm going to put a link into chat because as much as I assume I'm the only one who hasn't heard of anything, it's I always share the link. And so this is remixing open textbooks through an equity lens. So that's what the Rotel stands for. And it really is to take pre-existing content and incorporate lived experience from students, through the social equity lens. And this particular project, was funded to provide, I think it's 6 different institutions to be able to work with faculty to remix this, to address, it's the so many missing voices from a lot of these texts, and a lot of, you start out the conversation with it's more accessible because we're looking at affordability issues, and then once that content is getting into the hands of students, just to Rita's point, many of them are like, well, wait a minute, I'm not in here. And so it's inviting that co-creation process as well. So I think that this has been a really wonderful example of that.
Thanks so much for sharing, Sarah. Maha, please.
When Sarita started mentioning social emotional learning, it just made me realize that when I talked about equity and social justice, I didn't make that connection to care, which is very important for us. Like we always talk about that equity without care is just like a checkbox exercise. It's diversity theater that even now in the States is not allowed, which is like really shocking and everyone's reeling over there, obviously. And then if you have some people who care, but it's not equitably distributed, not everybody gets care, then you have partial care. Like some people get cared for, some people are carrying the burden, not everybody's getting it. It's a biased kind of care. And so for equity to actually work, you need socially just care. You need everyone to be participating in social justice and care and everybody to be receiving it, but everybody who's receiving it to be able to decide how they want to be cared for. And that's why them being involved is really important. In the work that we do at Equity Unbound, what we realize is what socially just care has to look like in practice looks different depending on the context. So for example, I've written before about how openness can sometimes allow us to do things in the open that are not safe to do inside our institutions. So you can have certain conversations, like what we try to do with some of what we do with Equity Unbound is that some of the conversations are not recorded and people can rename themselves and do whatever they want so that they can say whatever they want in the open. And there's a lot of stuff that has to happen in private. So sometimes, for example, with Palestine, we just met individuals and we didn't even announce those things, but just to provide some kind of solidarity, sometimes has to happen outside the institutions, but not in the open as in the public, right? And then there's other work where you need to distribute the care because everybody in a community needs to be offering care and not just the ones who are leading it or the ones who have a big role. Because if you think about any professional development opportunity that has, for example, breakout rooms, you as the facilitator, you have no idea exactly what's happening in the breakout rooms. So we need to sort of build cultures of care so that everybody feels like it's their responsibility and it's their role to always step in and help. So for example, it's everybody's responsibility to notice, oh, we have someone who has a certain disability, is like visually impaired today, therefore we have to be very careful about describing images all the time, for example. And then it's anybody's responsibility, not just who's facilitating or who's leading. And that aspect is really important. With even when you're doing, like I love the project Rotel that Sarah talked about right now, because during COVID, Equity Unbound worked with an organization called 1HE, and we created videos of how do you develop community online, because people were going to teach online. They'd never done this before. All the institutions were training people how to get their content and teach their classes, but nobody was really telling them how do you build community. But the important thing about this was that we'd have a group of different people from different cultures so that they can point to us. We may not have the facilities to do it synchronously. We may not have the facilities to do it with breakout rooms because we don't have, at the time, not all tools had breakout rooms except for Zoom. And to have different people from these different angles and to try to think, oh, how do we adapt? Like even signaling adaptability is part of equities. Like, how do you achieve this in these different ways? And then also some of the activities turned out to be culturally problematic in different contexts. And so you need to have that diversity in the teams of people doing things and to be willing and open to pointing out all the limitations of everything you're doing, even as you celebrate a lot of the open work that you're doing, even if you think that the open work you're doing is systemic and is addressing systemic issues, it's addressing the issues for whom? And who's the most marginalized among the people you're hoping to do this? Are they part of the design team? Do they have a voice, as you both were talking about?
Thanks so much, Maha. Surita, Sarah, do either of you want to come in on any reflections before we move on?
It's very quickly. It's one of the reasons why, I mean, because it's some of the people that you work with in different contexts and different groups, to Maha's point, like it does need to be all of our responsibility. Some people get it and others may be like, I don't, and because it is about I've heard people use the phrase like work happens at the speed of trust, and building relationships with folks, and you can't just expect everybody to get it all at once. That's one of the reasons why, and shout out to all of my anthropologist friends who, got me integrated and used to using participatory action research as a framework, because it's at least something you can point to be like, and this is actually what it looks like, the cycle of it. And when you incorporate voices, because you need to take many different approaches to get folks on board, and it takes time. It does. It takes a lot of time to form these relationships and create these communities of care. And I'd love to see it. And a shout out to my peers at UMass Medical, that I so appreciate the work, because I've only been there for about a year and a half. Everybody's been so open to having these conversations about when we're, creating a syllabus or a program, how do we incorporate the care component? That's become such a big part of the conversation. And, part of it's because we're in medical, but also because we're in the context that we're currently in. So it it takes everybody.
I'll just want to quickly echo kind of what was said about care. I think the resources that Maha mentioned, I remember when we had gone to online teaching, I actually went to a lot of those resources, and just taking the time to intentionally build that community with care made such a huge difference in those courses, and especially during that time when it was something, we didn't know how to navigate, really made a huge difference. And I think that's one thing I really take forward in different spaces that I go into, is to take that time. It makes a difference to build the trust and to have those difficult conversations, and to have whoever's in the room to perhaps be more comfortable to share their perspectives and experiences as well.
Yeah. I realized that Mark wrote something in the chat, but only us, the hosts and panelists, can see it. But I responded, so I'll just explain what was going on so that people watching the recording can see that. So Mark was telling me he'd never thought about the issue of breakout rooms, and it's a brilliant observation. He's like, perhaps there should be co-facilitators in each room who understand issues of social justice, which sometimes we can do that, but sometimes the number of facilitators you have is not enough to cover that. So what we try to do, obviously, so with Equity Unbound, we have something that's called the Mid-Year Festival. That's like a 3 months, come whenever you want throughout the 3 months PD. So people see each other a lot and they build community. But if I'm doing something for a group that I'm only meeting for this one time for 1 hour, 2 hours, I don't have time to sort of build that equity mindset. I use liberating structures, which in the One HE site, the community building site, the liberating structures we role play them, so you get to see how they work in practice. The website is liberatingstructures.com, but we're actually role playing them, and you're seeing in practice what it looks like to actually do them. And they have like this timing structure and this individual thought before you share, that kind of thing that gives people who need a little bit more reflection time, that ensures you think turn taking is a KG thing, it's a kindergarten thing, but adults need reminders to take turns and make sure other people get to speak. We all talked about this before we actually went live today. But I also think building community agreements is really important. And with Mid-Year Festival, we built community agreements with our community during a series called Intentionally Equitable Hospitality in Facilitation Series, which is our praxis for making sure we're equitable. And then we share them at the beginning of every session and just remind people to make space for others, remind people to describe visuals. Like there are actually maybe 20, and we pick 5 or 6 that we think are generally the most relevant, and just remind people of these things every time. And it takes 2 minutes to remind people and then send them the link, and then people get used to hearing them. We thought some people might get bored of it, but towards the end, people actually started to like this. And it also gives you like a couple minutes to get ready for everything. But it's also a reminder to people who are giving the workshops, because they're not necessarily people who are part of our community all the time. So someone who's presenting may forget to do some of these things. And so that's why yeah, of course, if you can co-develop them, it's much better. But if you don't have time to co-develop them, then at least sharing them and saying, does anybody want to add anything else, kind of thing. With students in a classroom, it's always like important to remind them to listen to each other. They're usually polite with the teacher, but maybe when another colleague is talking, they talk over each other. But even like online, that's definitely some people sometimes take up a lot of space and don't make room for others. And also another thing that we always say is like, you can have your camera on or off, you can participate in the chat or orally, participate as you feel comfortable. We always say your children and your pets and whoever in your family is welcome, food and drink are welcome. Like, why do we want to make people feel uncomfortable when they're online? They're already home and we're invading their home as it is a lot of the time. So just trying to make people as comfortable to come as they are as possible.
Thanks so much, Maha, and thanks, Sarita and Sarah. That's wonderful, and thanks so much for sharing, and as well to everyone that's engaging in the chat as well. Fantastic. Really appreciate those comments, and please do continue to add in comments and questions as well. We're going to kind of move on now and kind of maybe step out to a bit more of the broader context that we picked up on a little bit earlier as well. And it's been kind of woven in a bit through the discussion. And this was also picked up and I think it's a concern or coming up in a lot of discussions. So the OE Global Tour last week, for example, lucky enough to participate in a couple of those and be present for the discussions. And this kind of rise of authoritarian governments, anti-EDI narratives, which we've picked up on here. We've got funding cuts and the impact of these on higher education, open education as well. And I just wondered whether the panelists, I know Sarah, you've picked up on some of this as well, whether anyone wanted to share any thoughts or challenges, particular challenges that you're facing in your context as well. Thanks.
So I'm glad to get started here. I mean it's multi-layered. And I'll look again at the question because there's so many layers. Being in personally and amongst many colleagues and the other USians, been in higher education and the open education space, it felt like, we were starting to make some substantive strides toward, moving the needle, on the equity conversation, on education, on open education, working at the state level, increasing, federal funding opportunities, and especially, from the library perspective, working more closely with the National Institute of Health and receiving, more like sustainable lines of funding to be able to continue the work instead of kind of like just grabbing at seed funding here and there to kickstart and then never have things mature. And then it really was, the rug was just pulled right out from under. And since the start, since toward the end of last year, it's just everything is a moving target, I guess. There's like a real ephemerality to a lot of the work that we're doing. And it's layered in the sense that, I think I mentioned briefly earlier that many of us are disappearing. And by that I mean folks working, federal workers, there have been thousands of layoffs. And, this is predominantly in, spaces like, the Environmental Protection Agency, National Institute of Health, the Department of Education, just wiping out, just wiping them out. And so, that's one layer. And that really hits hard, not only for, obviously the operational aspects of things, but for the people involved. There are many people who are, have dedicated their lives to this work. They support their families with this work. They're suddenly without jobs, and the the market is being flooded with folks every day. I see more announcements. I had another, colleague in the space at Plymouth State recently that I was just like shocked, because it's happening everywhere. Yes, Robin. And I think that for folks who haven't been shaken like that before, it's shocking. It's very unnerving. Anxiety is really high. And so there's the anxiety at the professional level, and then there's of course the students that we have as well. I mean, we had ICE starting to show up in our hospital like last year. I'm working with students who from other programs, other institutions who are having a lot of issues getting their visas renewed or being able to travel back and forth. It's so much. And so there's absolutely the social aspect of it too, and people just like really hurting and being, just not really knowing what their future is going to be. And then there's the research aspect of it, the work aspect. Data is disappearing. A lot of our federal data is just again, like the rug just getting pulled out. These massive data sets and, working especially in the open education space, open data space, open science space, we're relying on these data sets for engaging, you know, our communities, for engaging our students, for continuing our research, and they've just been getting wiped off. And so some of the ways in which we have been mitigating some of this are with you know, collaborative projects like the Data Rescue Project, which, you know, the folks may be familiar with. I'll drop a link into chat. And here, this is something I'll put into chat here. This is something more at the local level. And for those who are not already working with their libraries, again, I feel like libraries are really well positioned to engage in being creative and resourceful and figuring out what's next, because we've always been in that space. Libraries have pretty much always been under attack from some aspect, some funder, from some board member. And so, you know, we've always, as librarians, always put together guides. Our code of ethics is to, you know, connect people with information, get them what they need. And this guide I just shared is a collection of advocacy resources that I worked with. It's a subcommittee. I and some of my colleagues, you know, I didn't do this in a vacuum at all. But just a collection of like, this is what you can do. You know, you didn't really have to think about this before, maybe you didn't. Here are organizations at the local, federal level. I put together a couple of letter templates where it's like you want to write to one of your politicians, but you haven't had, here, take this. It's a template. Just take it and fill it out and send it, you know, just really trying to remove some of those barriers. Anyway, I'll stop because I feel like I could, there's plenty to go on about, but I'll let Maha and Sarita.
I mean, you're the one who's living it, so this was, I think, your question. Honestly, the impact here is it's there, but it's so much less than what you're living every day. I actually have a question for you, if that's okay. And there's this element of open, but in the shadows still that you're talking about. And I was wondering if people who had been working very openly got harmed. And this is what hurts my heart, is like the people who were very publicly pro DEI, social justice work, if they are the ones are most harmed these days, or
It's interesting. It's really interesting because, you know, we've been asking a lot of these questions since it started happening because at the, you know, that we have these federal mandates to scrub language from website. Yeah, it's yep,
it's worse, basically.
it's worse. Yeah, sorry, I don't. It's worse, but yeah, it's worse. Mhm. But the thing that really gives me hope, honestly, and being in the academic space, moral panic until a change of government. Yeah. Yeah, you can ask. There yeah, I mean it depends. It depends on who you talk to. Um, there are people who are just kind of like, ah, you know, and um and I mean, and I don't know. It's just like they're because of the Blitzkrieg approach that's been taken here. And for those who don't aren't familiar with the term Blitzkrieg, is it's a tactic that's used in war where you throw so many things all at once at the opposing side that they don't know where to look. And while everybody's looking over here, you kind of sneak in behind enemy lines. And that's kind of like that's the phenomenon we're experiencing right now. Um, I won't get too much farther into that because I could talk about that for a very long time. But to your question, Mark, about until the change of government happens, so much damage has been done. We really don't know what it's going to look like if and when things change. So I feel like a lot of people are kind of like in stasis, you know, just trying to focus on what's in front of them.
Thanks so much for sharing, Sarah. We appreciate that. And as we're kind of heading into the final few minutes of the session, I feel like we could keep talking because there's such an awful lot to to talk about on this topic. I wanted to pick up on we've had a number of questions and comments in the chat. Thank you to everybody for those. I wanted to pick up on the question around resilience and solidarity and how we can going forward, given the kind of context that we've been discussing today, and picking up on the kind of different approaches and things that people have discussed as we've moved through. But just to really maybe reflect on yeah, how we can build resilience, as Rob says in the Q&A, and what kinds of acts of solidarity or things we can do to support each other. And I'd like to open it up, if that's all right, to maybe start with you, Sarita, for this, if that's all right. Thank you.
Yes. I just want to great comments in the chat. Just kind of read them. Get really distracted when I'm listening and reading. So, I really take to heart. I was reflecting on this question earlier, and I think finding communities that you can connect with. I really take to heart Maha's comment about these spaces where you can have conversations that are not always public. Um, I think for myself and for others, being outwardly and saying things sometimes really feels unsafe. And even myself, I'm cautious of that, depending on what spaces I'm in. Um, and I think there also needs to be a way to, as thinking about this, there's a lot of invisible harms that are happening right now that we are not aware of. And so I think if there's a way, and that's what I love about open, is it creates a space where you can share these narratives that you don't get in other spaces. Like a textbook may not get to that, right? But open, it's constantly changing. You can revise and update if there's a way to share those experiences, because I think there's so much misinformation. You don't see the harms that are perpetuated. And Sarah, you shared so deeply about what is happening. We have different things happening in Canada. There are pockets. We're not immune to this. And so I think sometimes when you talk about it, when you don't have those narratives and you don't see what's happening, you feel like, well, maybe it's not that bad. Things will get better, or you don't recognize. And so I think that's why I care so deeply about open, and why I see it as it's a way to get those narratives. They're so heartfelt. And if it's a way to share it, and I think it can sometimes go, oh, I didn't realize that's the impact. I didn't know, right? It's often a not knowing. And I recognize the timing, and so I want to also leave time for Maha and Sarah. But I just want to share that as a way to go forward. A way of resiliency is getting those stories and narratives out there, because they're so powerful and they touch you. Sarah, just even what you spoke about really touches your soul, and it stays with you.
Thank you so much, Sarita. Maha, please.
Very quickly, I do think that beside those of us who are unsafe working underground and supporting each other privately, which there, even in less unsafe times, there are people who will feel more fragile and vulnerable in the open. Those who do have privilege speaking out when those who can't. So, for example, I have, American and German friends in Egypt. They're not in the US, so they can speak out about certain things and they're not going to lose their jobs. They're not under threat. They may not be able to get into the US though. But anyway, they're, yeah, it's that combination of when you have power to be able to advocate out loud and to speak, then you do. And when you don't, the only way not to lose hope for me is in those networks and communities and connections that you can make. I make them in the open, but then the conversations may happen behind the scenes in ways that are safer for whoever needs to be having those. But Sarah, I mean, you're living this, so you know.
Yeah. Yes, and um I don't know. I think I give myself and my colleagues a lot of grace. I guess. And it's hard for me to just not think about it in that way, because this is not what's happening right now. It's okay to be upset about it. It's okay to be angry. there's a lot of action that can be taken, and it's not unique to our country's context. I think that a lot of people just are not accustomed to this kind of thing happening. And so just, holding space for those types of conversations where it's like people are really shocked and kind of frozen, being like, okay, like giving the space to feel that if they haven't been through anything like this before. A lot of people have, um, outside the US. Oh, love the swim. Sorry, I do get distracted by chat a bit. But yeah, I think that, on the local level, there are some days that are worse than others. Um, and and I know that one of the things that's been really helpful, for a lot of us are, more of those networks and those social connections, spending a lot of time, having conversations, sharing meals. One of the things I've been very thankful for is the continuing work of this environmental justice collaborative that we have been, spearheading at the medical school. It's just, we've talked before in these meetings. It was a collection of folks who came together and just started the work and got a grant and, moved forward and continued, got a wonderful woman who interned to help us build out some of this work. I don't know if Tiange ended up coming here, but we've said over time how it's really like that work that we're doing together and having that shared purpose and having, that solidarity together has really saved us in a lot of ways. So anyway, I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And I know we're just over the hour, so I'm going to draw the discussion to a close. I'd like to say a massive thank you to all of our panelists for sharing their insights and being so open in the discussion. It's been a really rich and interesting discussion, raising lots of strategies and some of the ways we can support each other going forward as well. So yeah, incredibly grateful to Sarah, Sarita and Maha for their time and for sharing. We really do appreciate it. Thank you to everybody for their questions and comments in the chat as well today. A really massive thank you. So thank you so much to everybody. And we look forward and hope to see you in 2 weeks' time tomorrow for our final session in this webinar series. So thank you so much, Sarita, Maha, and Sarah. We really appreciate your time and for sharing with us. It's been really special, and thank you so much.